in dealing with change, the motivational challenge is this one: how to access hope over fear. And stories, because all stories are essentially structured the same. In a story, there's a plot, there's a challenge to a protagonist. We identify empathetically with the protagonist, so we feel what's going on, we not just understand what's going on. And so the moral of the story teaches the heart, not just the head. This is why our faith traditions, our cultural traditions, our family traditions are all taught through stories. Because what stories are teaching us are how to confront uncertainty constructively and hopefully. And I was talking yesterday afternoon with the mayor about this question of hope, and I think it's important to distinguish between optimism and hopefulness. Optimism is sort of the view that, hey, everything's going to turn out all right, no problem. Hope is realistic. Hope looks at the world clearly and recognizes its challenges. But it also recognizes that, and this is the definition I find very helpful, that hope is based on the plausibility of the possible, not simply the necessity of the probable. Let me repeat that. That the possible is plausible, not only the probable. That it's possible, although highly improbable, for a black man to have been elected president of the United States. Utterly improbable, but it happened. And the realist recognizes possibility as well as probability. And that is a precious source of understanding necessary in order to engage change constructively. Over the last several days, we had an opportunity to hear many stories. Stories of motivation, of why people in your community are acting. And I was struck particularly by the story of Faisal Abusundos. I hope I'm not saying that right. An environmental activist. In reflecting on why he is so committed to protecting the environment, recounting the story of the day his father's oak trees were chopped down. And his father, in sorrow and tears, collapsed on his back for the loss of what those trees represented to his family, his community, and his hope. It says a lot about why we do what we do and how we can communicate what we do to others. Second, organizing is based on civic relationships that can create the mutual commitments needed to work together. It's not enough to motivate one another through drawing on values of hope and inspiration and urgency and challenge in order to be able to act, because it takes both. It's a process of association of people with each other that makes a whole greater than the sum of its parts. Because it's through association that individual interests become common interests, interests on behalf of we can commit using combined resources. But relationship building, and I'm speaking of civic relationship building, because we all build relationships all through our lives. I'm talking about the building of intentional civic relationships at the foundation of organizing and civic association. Go beyond delivering a message, extracting a contribution, or soliciting a vote. Organizers trained in the craft of one-on-one meetings and house meetings create a foundation for local organization rooted in the commitments that people make to one another. In other words, it's not a commitment to an idea, it's a commitment to another person. And it's those commitments we make to one another that become sources of what my colleague Bob Putnam described as social capital. Social capital, the resource of relationships that we have with one another, is foundational. When organizing Mexican migrant farm workers in California in the 1960s, a community in which few established organizations existed, especially any that would support organizing, it was through relational organizing, one-on-one, extended families, social networks, and neighborhoods that we created a foundation for a whole new organization that would eventually improve the lives of more than 100,000 farm workers and their families. This is particularly important when it comes to the work of change. An insurgent candidate, Barack Obama, was without access to established organizations and institutions, and we had to build that organization from scratch as well. In South Carolina, for example, in October 2007, 20 organizers held over a period of months, some 400 house meetings which individuals invited their friends to their homes, and then each of them invited friends to their homes. They were attended by 4,000 people it became the foundation for a mobilization that would deploy 15,000 election day volunteers, most of them active politically for the first time. So relational work, intentionally carried out, spanning differences and crossing boundaries, is the second foundation for organizing. Third, structuring authority based on team leadership rather than individual leadership, shared purpose, clear norms, and well-defined roles. In volunteer efforts in particular, one of the major challenges is reliable, consistent, and creative local leadership. Individual leadership can be very fragile. People burn out, they try to do it all themselves, people easily fall into contention. Structured team leadership can encourage stability, motivation, and accountability, which use volunteer time, skills, and effort effectively. Clear structure can create the space within which real work can get done. It creates an understanding of leadership that is interdependent, in which people can play complementary roles, just as they do on an athletic team, just as they do in a musical group, where it requires each person's contribution to make the team work. The advantage is, aside from the benefit of diverse roles working together, the advantage is that it enables more resources to be brought to bear on any circumstance and on any challenge or any project. In the Obama campaign, this was one of the ways that we created a viable volunteer organization. Rather than trying to organize many individuals, it was structuring local leadership teams in community after community, and it was those local leadership teams that sustained the effort of the campaign. Although the organization of 11,000 local leadership teams was the foundation for the campaign success in Ohio. Since then, in areas as diverse as climate change, immigration reform, healthcare, and youth organizing, we found the concept of team leadership to be enormously valuable as a way to work. It requires work. It requires defining common purpose. It requires establishing norms of self-governance. But in our workshop alone, 5 teams found common purpose around youth, around children, around safety, around public space, and around enhancing civic engagement in the city as a whole. Fourth, translating shared values into action requires focus on a few very clear, well-understood strategic objectives, the art of strategizing. The art of strategizing, turning what we have into what we need to get what we want. Let me say that again. Strategy, turning what we have to get what we need into what we need to get what we want. Real change rarely is achieved by raising awareness or advocating or sharing information, but requires creating new capacity, new possibility, and new sources of power. Let me share a story with you about the significance of creativity or resourcefulness, strategic resourcefulness, when it comes to strategy. It's a story familiar in many traditions. It's the story of the people of Jalut, if I've been instructed properly here, and Daoud, and the people of Beni Israel, I guess. Okay. I know it in my tradition as the story of David and Goliath. It's the story of a powerful warrior who confronts people who are afraid to pick up the challenge of that warrior. And the warrior comes out day to day, day after day, powerful giant, and says, "Come and do battle with me, and if I send your champion to face me, and if he defeats me, then we're yours, and if I defeat him, then we'll be yours." What's the reaction on the other side? They're afraid. They look at their shoes. They don't respond, and it goes on day after day after day, until one day, a young man who's 14 years old, named Daoud, comes to bring lunch to his brothers. He's not a warrior, he's a shepherd. And he delivers lunch to his brothers, and that's when Jalut comes out, and he comes out with his challenges and his insults. But David, this young man of 14, is also a man of faith. And he says, this is an injustice, this is an insult to the ranks of the living God. We must fight. And his brothers say, shut up, kid. Don't make trouble. Just keep quiet. But he insists until he goes to the king, and he says to the king, King, let me go fight this powerful warrior. And the king says, you're too young. You don't have the experience. You haven't been trained. You haven't been to the Amman Institute leadership workshop. You don't have the right skills. To which he responds, well, yeah, but I'm all you've got, so you better go with me. The king says, all right, you got a point. I'll let you fight, but on one condition. You've got to take my sword, my shield, and my helmet. This man is a powerful warrior. Since his youth, you're but a youth, you won't be able to fight him. He takes the sword, the shield, and helmet, he puts them on, but he finds they're so heavy that he can't move. And when he can't move, he looks down at his feet, and he notices in a wadi 5 smooth stones. And he reflects, wait a second, I'm not a soldier, I'm a warrior, I'm a shepherd. And as a shepherd, I knew how to protect my flock from the wolf and the bear, and it wasn't with the sword and the shield, it was with the stone and the sling. Maybe Jalut is just another wolf, just another bear. He takes off the armor, picks up the stones, puts them in his pouch, goes to face this powerful warrior who takes one look and begins to laugh. Ha, ha, am I a dog? You send a boy with a stick, and in the middle of the third ha, stone in the forehead, and it's the end of Jalut. Now, it's not a story about nonviolence, but it is a story about strategy. And the point of the story, let me share with you reflection on this. What does this parable teach us about strategy? Well, the first thing it teaches is that nothing is happening to deal with the challenge until Dawood recognizes the injustice and makes a commitment to deal with it. In other words, his commitment is not contingent on having a feasible strategy. A feasible strategy is developed from his commitment. Second, he goes to the king, and the king says, here, you're going to fight a powerful warrior, you need what the powerful warrior has, sword and shield. Does that make sense? He tried it, he put them on, he couldn't move, and that's when he realized what? He realized that if he was to build a strategy that would work, it'd have to be built from his resources, not the resources of his powerful opponent. His powerful opponent would be far better at it. Thirdly, why did he recognize this possibility? He was the one outsider there. He was the shepherd, not the soldier. The soldiers all saw power in one way, as a sword and a shield. David, because he was a shepherd, could see a stone and a sling as a source of power as well, and was able to creatively reconfigure the whole battlefield. And finally, when he went to face the powerful warrior, who took a look at him and began to laugh, it reminded me of something Cesar Chavez used to say, whom I worked with. Power, he said, makes you stupid. And what he meant was that a reliance on overwhelming military, political, and economic force, you stop thinking. And that's what creates opportunities for the Daouds of this world to make change. So strategy, from my point of view, is about embracing strategy, from my point of view, is about recognizing the significance of our commitments, number one. Devising strategy, not waiting to commit based on a feasibility study by McKinsey or one other consulting firm or another, but rather making the commitments in order to devise the strategy based on the resources that we have, learning as we go to achieve results. Without that, social movements and social change would not work. And finally, organizing outcomes must be clear, measurable, and specific if progress is to be evaluated. If it is to be evaluated, if accountability is to be practiced, and if we are to learn from what we're doing. This is the difficulty I have with awareness campaigns. How do you know when you've succeeded? How do you measure awareness? What is it? I don't know. But if you turn out a certain number of people to a meeting, you can measure that. If you pass a law, you can measure that. If you're able to improve safety conditions in the neighborhood, you can measure that.